Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The first time I saw Marcus Hale's file cross my desk, I figured we'd have him in custody within 48 hours, maximum. That was 3 weeks ago. 23 days, to be exact. And when it finally ended, if you can even call it an ending, when I sat down to write the report with my hands still shaking and my coffee going cold in front of me, I couldn't find the right words to explain what had happened out there in those woods. I still can't, and I've had months to think about it. My name is Deputy U.S. Marshal David Corman, and I've been with the service for 11 years. 11 years of tracking people who don't want to be found, of standing on the wrong side of locked doors at 3 in the morning, of learning that human beings are capable of both incredible stupidity and terrifying intelligence when their freedom is on the line. I've tracked armed robbers through the Everglades in August heat that made your brain feel like it was melting. I've cornered meth dealers in abandoned grain silos where one spark could have turned us all into pink mist. I've pulled fugitives out of attics where they'd been hiding for months, living in their own filth, eating rats, doing whatever it took to stay free for just one more day. I've seen people do desperate things when they're running. I've seen them hurt people they love. I've seen them abandon children, steal from churches, shoot at cops who were just doing their jobs. I've seen them make mistakes that cost them everything, their families, their futures, their lives. But I've never seen anything like Marcus Hale. Not before that case. Not since. And if I'm being honest, I hope I never see anything like it again. The warrant came through on a Tuesday morning in late September. Federal firearms violations, assault on a federal officer, and flight to avoid prosecution. Hale had been a person of interest in a string of armed robberies across the Midwest. Small-town banks mostly, places with minimal security and even less backup. The FBI had been building a case for months, but when agents showed up at his trailer outside of Asheville, North Carolina, things went sideways fast. According to the report, Hale had been expecting them. He'd barricaded the front door, fired 3 rounds through the window, and then disappeared into the woods before the tactical team could get into position. No vehicle, no supplies, just gone. That was 2 weeks before the file landed on my desk. The case was assigned to us because Hale crossed state lines. Witnesses reported seeing him in Tennessee, then Kentucky, then North Carolina again. He was constantly on the move and fled whenever local law enforcement approached him. This wasn't luck. It was something else. I teamed up with Deputy Sheriff Lisa Garrett to pursue the man. She had been in this role longer than me, 15 years, and was known for her meticulousness. She was patient. She was the kind of officer who could sit in a car for 12 hours without complaint, watching a door that would never open. We had worked together before, tracking a bail jumper in rural Virginia, and I trusted her instincts. "What's your read on this guy?" she asked me on the drive down to North Carolina. We were heading to Asheville to meet with the local sheriff's department and go over what they had. I flipped through the file again. Marcus Hale. 42 years old. No family, no fixed address for the past 3 years. A string of manual labor jobs, mostly construction, all of them ending abruptly. No social media presence, no phone records. It was like he'd been practicing for this his whole life. "He's careful," I said. "Paranoid, maybe. Knows how to move without leaving a trail." "Think he's got help?" No. I'd thought about that. Every sighting's been solo. He's not reaching out to anyone. He's just running. For 2 weeks straight? I didn't answer. That was the part that didn't make sense. Running for 2 weeks meant sleeping rough, finding food, staying ahead of every agency in 3 states. It meant constant movement, constant vigilance. Most fugitives burn out after a few days. They get tired, they make mistakes, they reach out to someone they shouldn't. But Hale wasn't doing any of that. The Asheville Sheriff's Office was a squat brick building on the edge of town, surrounded by mountains that looked like they went on forever. Sheriff Tom Milliken met us in the lobby. A heavy-set man in his late 50s with the kind of face that had seen too many bad situations. "You're the marshals?" he asked, shaking our hands. His grip was firm but brief. "Come on back. We've got everything set up." He led us to a conference room where a map of the area was spread across the table, marked with red circles and lines. "These are all the confirmed sightings," Milliken said, pointing to the clusters. "Started here, at his trailer. Then we got reports of him heading east into the Pisgah National Forest. That's about 500,000 acres of wilderness, most of it uninhabited." "Any pattern to the sightings?" Garrett asked. "That's the thing," Milliken said, leaning against the table. "There's no pattern. He shows up in one place, then 12 hours later he's spotted 30 miles away on foot. No vehicle, no bike, nothing. Just walking. 30 miles in 12 hours? I said. "That's not possible, not in that terrain." "I know." Milliken's expression didn't change. "But that's what we're seeing. And it's not just the distance, it's the timing. We've had 3 separate reports of him being in 2 different places at the same time." Garrett and I exchanged a glance. "Mistaken identity," she said. "Maybe." Milliken didn't sound convinced. But all 3 witnesses gave the same description. Same height, same build, same torn jacket. And one of them was my deputy, a guy who's been on the force for 20 years. He's not the type to make mistakes. I studied the map. The sightings formed a rough circle around the national forest, like Hale was staying close to the wilderness but occasionally drifting into town for supplies. "What about trail cameras?" I asked. "Hunters use them out there. Anything turn up?" "That's the weird part," Milliken said. He pulled out a folder and spread a series of photographs across the table. "We pulled footage from every camera we could find. Look at these timestamps." The photos were grainy, black and white, the kind of low-quality images you'd expect from cheap motion-activated cameras. But they all showed the same figure, a man in a dark jacket walking through the woods. In some shots he was barely visible, just a blur at the edge of the frame. In others, he was staring directly at the camera. I picked up one of the photos. The timestamp read 3:47 a.m. The next photo, from a different camera 5 miles away, read 4:02 a.m. 15 minutes, Garrett said quietly. 5 miles in 15 minutes. On foot, Milliken added. In the middle of the night, through dense forest. I set the photo down. He could be running. Maybe. Milliken's tone suggested he didn't believe it. But here's the thing. We sent a team out to check the route between those cameras. It's rough terrain. Steep inclines, thick underbrush, a creek that's swollen from the rain. Even at a dead sprint, it would take at least 40 minutes. And that's in daylight, with someone who knows the area. "What are you saying?" Garrett asked. Milliken looked at us both, his expression grim. "I'm saying this guy doesn't sleep. Or, if he does, we haven't caught him doing it. Every sighting, every photo, it's always at night, always moving. We've had officers staking out the trails, watching for him to bed down somewhere, but he never does. He just keeps walking." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "How long has he been doing this?" 2 weeks, Milliken said, "since he ran from the FBI. And in that time, We haven't found a single campsite, no fire pits, no shelters, nothing. It's like he doesn't need to rest." Garrett was quiet for a moment, staring at the map. "People don't work that way," she said finally. "The human body needs sleep. After 72 hours without it, you start hallucinating. After a week, you can't function. After 2 weeks," she trailed off. "After 2 weeks, you should be dead," Milliken finished. "I know. But Marcus Hale isn't dead. He's out there, right now, and he's still moving." We spent the rest of the afternoon going over every detail. Witness statements, surveillance footage, reports from the tracking dogs that had lost his scent at a creek and never picked it up again. The more I read, the less sense it made. One witness, a hiker, said she'd seen Hale standing on a ridge at dawn, perfectly still, staring at the sunrise. She'd called it in, but by the time officers arrived, he was gone. Another witness, a gas station attendant, said Hale had come in at 2 a.m. to buy bottled water and beef jerky. He'd paid in cash, hadn't said a word, and left. The attendant described his eyes as empty, like he was looking through her instead of at her. "Did she say anything else?" I asked Milliken. He hesitated. "She said he didn't blink. Not once. She noticed because it creeped her out." "Maybe she was tired," Garrett said. "Late shift, you see things." "Maybe." Milliken didn't look convinced. That night, Garrett and I checked into a motel on the edge of town. It was the kind of place where the air conditioner rattled and the TV only got 3 channels. But it was close to the forest, and that's what mattered. We'd start our search at first light, working our way through the areas where Hale had been sighted most recently. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the photos, about the timestamps, about the witness who said Hale's eyes were empty. I kept telling myself there had to be a rational explanation. Mistaken identity, faulty cameras, exaggerated reports. But the more I turned it over in my mind, the less any of that made sense. At some point, I must have dozed off because I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was 4:23 a.m. Garrett's name was on the screen. "Yeah?" I answered, my voice thick with sleep. "Turn on the news," she said. "Local station, Channel 7. I fumbled for the remote and flipped through the channels until I found it. The screen showed a reporter standing in front of a small convenience store, the kind of place that stayed open all night for truckers and insomniacs. The banner at the bottom of the screen read, "Fugitive sighting in Bakersville. Spotted just after midnight," the reporter was saying. "Witnesses say the man matching the description of Marcus Hale entered the store, purchased several items, and left on foot. Authorities are asking anyone with information to call the tip line." Bakersville. I grabbed the map from the table and found it. It was 40 miles north of Asheville, in the opposite direction from where we'd expected Hale to go. "He's moving again," Garrett said on the phone. "We need to get out there. Now? Now!" I was dressed and in the car within 10 minutes. Garrett was waiting in the parking lot, her expression tense. We didn't talk much on the drive. The roads were empty at that hour, just the two of us and the occasional semi-truck hauling freight through the mountains. Bakersville was a nothing town, population maybe 500, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers stood out. The convenience store was on the main drag, a fluorescent-lit box surrounded by darkness. 2 sheriff's deputies were already there, interviewing the clerk. "Marshals?" one of them asked as we walked in. He was young, mid-20s, with the kind of nervous energy that came from being new on the job. "You hear about the sighting?" "Yeah," I said. "What did the clerk say?" "She's pretty shaken up," the deputy said. "Says the guy came in, didn't say a word, just grabbed what he needed and left. Paid in cash. exact change. She said he smelled like the woods, like dirt and sweat. Did you get a good look at him? Garrett asked. Yeah. The deputy glanced toward the clerk, a middle-aged woman sitting on a stool behind the counter. She said it was definitely him. Same description as the bulletin, but there's something else. What? She said he was soaking wet, like he'd just walked through a river. I felt that cold sensation again, settling into my chest. Was it raining tonight? No, the deputy said. Hasn't rained in 2 days. Garrett and I exchanged a look. Can we talk to her? I asked. The clerk's name was Denise. She was in her late 40s with tired eyes and hands that wouldn't stop shaking. She told us the same story the deputy had relayed, but with more detail. Hale had walked in at 12:14 a.m. She remembered the exact time because she'd been watching the clock, waiting for her shift to end. He'd gone straight to the back of the store, grabbed 3 bottles of water and a pack of trail mix, and brought them to the counter without looking at her. He didn't say anything? I asked. Not a word, Denise said. I tried to make small talk, ask him how his night was going, but he didn't respond, just stared at the counter. And you said he was wet? Soaked, she said. His jacket, his pants, everything. Water was dripping off him, pooling on the floor. I thought maybe he'd been in an accident or something, but he didn't seem hurt. He just seemed tired, like he'd been walking forever. Did he say where he was going? No. Denise wrapped her arms around herself. But when he left, I watched him through the window. He didn't go to a car or anything. He just started walking north toward the mountains. And here's the thing. She paused, like she wasn't sure she should say it. Go on, Garrett said gently. He didn't walk like a normal person. It was more like he was being pulled, like something was dragging him forward. I know that sounds crazy, but that's what it looked like. I thanked her and stepped outside with Garrett. The night was cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and doesn't let go. What do you think? I asked. I think she's telling the truth, Garrett said. But I don't know what that means. He's heading north, I said, looking toward the mountains, deeper into the wilderness, or away from something. I turned to look at her. What do you mean? I don't know, she said quietly. But people run toward things or away from things, and I don't think Marcus Hale is running toward anything. We spent the rest of the night following his trail. The deputies lent us a thermal scope, and we hiked into the foothills, scanning for any sign of heat signature. The forest was dense, the kind of darkness that swallows sound and light and makes you feel like you're walking through a void. At one point, Garrett stopped. Do you hear that? She asked. I listened. At first, there was nothing. Then, faintly, I heard it. Footsteps, steady, rhythmic, moving through the underbrush somewhere ahead of us. We followed the sound for 20 minutes, but we never got closer. It was always just ahead, just out of reach, like we were chasing a ghost. When the sun finally came up, we were miles from the road, standing on a rocky outcrop overlooking a valley. The forest stretched out below us, endless and silent. Somewhere down there, Marcus Hale was still moving. He's not going to stop, Garrett said. Is he? I didn't answer, because I was starting to think she was right. We didn't find Marcus Hale that first day, or the second, or the third. What we did find were traces. Boot prints in the mud, always heading north. A torn piece of fabric caught on a branch, the same dark jacket every witness had described. A discarded water bottle, still cold to the touch like it had been set down minutes before we arrived. Each piece of evidence told us we were close, but close wasn't enough. By the end of the first week, we'd covered over 100 miles of terrain. Garrett and I worked 12-hour shifts, sometimes longer, coordinating with local search and rescue teams, tracking dogs, even a helicopter from the state police. But Hale stayed ahead of us, always. "It's like he knows where we're going to be," Garrett said one night. We were sitting in the car at the edge of a logging road eating cold sandwiches and going over the map for the 100th time. "Every time we set up a perimeter, he slips through. Every time we think we've got him cornered, he's already gone. He's got experience," I said. "Military, maybe. Or he's spent enough time in the wilderness to know how to move without being seen." "It's more than that," Garrett said. She pointed to the map. "Look at this. We've got sightings here, here, and here, all within a 6-hour window. That's 15 miles between the first and last sighting, on foot, in the dark." "People can cover that distance," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "Not without rest," Garrett said. "Not for a week straight. David, he's not sleeping. We've got thermal imaging, trail cameras, officers posted at every shelter and campsite within 50 miles. And we haven't caught him resting once." I stared at the map. She was right. Every sighting, every piece of evidence, pointed to the same impossible conclusion. Marcus Hale hadn't stopped moving since the day he ran. The locals started talking. It started with the search and rescue volunteers, the people who knew the mountains better than anyone. They'd come back from the field with stories that didn't quite add up. Footprints that ended in the middle of a clearing, with no sign of where they continued. Strange sounds in the night, like someone walking in circles just beyond the edge of the campfire light. One volunteer, a man named Carl, who'd been hiking these mountains for 30 years, told me he'd seen Hale standing on a ridge at dusk. "I yelled at him to stop," Carl said. "But he didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me. And then he turned and walked into the trees. I followed him, but when I got to the ridge there was nothing. No tracks, no sound, nothing. It was like he'd vanished." "Maybe he circled back," I suggested. Carl shook his head. "I know these woods, Marshall. I know every trail, every shortcut. There's no way he could have doubled back without me seeing him. It's like he just stepped out of existence." I didn't know what to say to that. The sightings kept coming. A gas station attendant in a town called Marshall reported seeing Hale at 3 a.m., buying more water and trail mix. A farmer near Hot Springs said he'd seen someone matching Hale's description walking along the highway at dawn, soaked to the skin despite the clear weather. A truck driver said he'd nearly hit Hale on a back road, that the man had stepped into the road without warning and then disappeared into the ditch before he could brake. "Did you stop?" I asked the trucker. "Hell no," he said. "I wasn't about to get out of my truck in the middle of the night for some lunatic, but I saw him in the rear view. He was just standing there watching me drive away." "What was he doing?" "Nothing, just standing, didn't move, didn't blink. It was like he wasn't real." Garrett and I decided to split up. She'd take the northern routes, focusing on the areas where Hale had been sighted most recently. I'd work the southern trails, covering the places he might circle back to. It wasn't ideal, but we were running out of options. I spent 2 days hiking alone, following every lead, checking every abandoned cabin and hunting blind. The forest was starting to feel different, oppressive, like the trees were watching me. I told myself it was just exhaustion, that I'd been out here too long but the feeling wouldn't go away. On the 3rd day, I found something. It was a campsite, or what was left of one. A ring of stones arranged in a circle, the ashes inside still warm. I knelt down and touched them, feeling the faint heat against my fingers. Someone had been here recently, within the last few hours. I radioed Garrett. "I've got something, looks like a fire pit, still warm." "Where are you?" she asked. I gave her my coordinates. "About 2 miles east of the Appalachian Trail junction. I'm going to keep looking." "Be careful," she said. "If it's him, he knows you're there." I stood up and scanned the area. The campsite was in a small clearing surrounded by dense trees. There were no footprints, no sign of which direction the person had gone. Just the fire pit and a few flattened patches of grass where someone might have sat. And then I saw it. Carved into a tree at the edge of the clearing was a single word: awake. The letters were rough, jagged, like they'd been scratched into the bark with a knife. I stared at it for a long moment, trying to make sense of it. Was it a message, a warning, or just the random graffiti of someone passing through? I took a photo and sent it to Garrett. Her response came back almost immediately. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," I typed back, "but it's fresh." I spent the next hour searching the area, but I didn't find anything else. No footprints, no discarded items, nothing. Just that one word, carved into the tree like a taunt. That night, I drove back to the motel and found Garrett waiting for me in the parking lot. She looked as tired as I felt, her eyes bloodshot, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Any luck?" she asked. "Maybe," I said, showing her the photo of the carving. "What do you think it means?" She stared at it for a long time. "I think he's trying to tell us something. Or warn us. About what?" I didn't have an answer. We went inside and spread the map across the bed, marking every sighting, every piece of evidence, every strange report. The pattern was becoming clearer. Hale wasn't just running, he was circling. Moving in a rough loop around the national forest, never straying too far from the center, but never staying in one place long enough to be caught. "He's tethered," Garrett said. "To something, like he can't leave." "Or won't," I said. "What's the difference?" I didn't know. The next morning, we got a call from Sheriff Milliken. Another sighting, this time at a rest stop on the highway. A trucker had reported seeing Hale in the parking lot, standing by the dumpsters, just staring at the road. "We sent a unit out there," Milliken said. But by the time they arrived, he was gone. The trucker said he looked wrong, like he was sick or something. Said his skin was gray, and he was swaying on his feet. "How long ago was this?" I asked. 20 minutes. Garrett and I were in the car within 5 minutes. The rest stop was 15 miles away, and we made it in 10, lights flashing, siren wailing. But when we got there, Hale was already gone. The trucker was still there, though, leaning against his rig, smoking a cigarette. His hands were shaking. "You saw him?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "I saw him, or whatever the hell that was." "What do you mean?" The trucker took a long drag and exhaled slowly. "I've been driving these roads for 20 years, Marshall. I've seen all kinds of things. Drunks, junkies, people at the end of their rope. But that guy, that wasn't normal. Can you describe him? Tall, maybe 6 foot, dark jacket, ripped jeans. But it was his face, man. It was like he wasn't all there. His eyes were wide open, but he wasn't seeing anything. And his skin, it was this weird gray color, like he'd been dead for days. I thought maybe he was a corpse or something, but then he moved." "What did he do?" "He turned and looked right at me. And I swear to God, Marshall, it felt like he was looking through me, like I wasn't even there, and then he just walked off into the trees. Didn't run, didn't stumble, just walked. Like he had somewhere to be." I thanked the trucker and walked over to the tree line. Garrett was already there, crouched down, examining the ground. "Got tracks," she said. "Fresh, heading northwest." We followed them for half a mile before they disappeared at a creek. The dogs lost the scent again, just like before. It was like Hale had vanished into thin air. "How is he doing this?" Garrett asked, frustration creeping into her voice. "I don't know," I said, "but we're going to find out." That night, I couldn't sleep again. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the trucker's description. Gray skin, empty eyes, like he'd been dead for days. People don't look like that when they're alive, not unless they're very, very sick. I pulled out my phone and started researching. Sleep deprivation, extreme fatigue, dehydration. The symptoms matched what the trucker had described. After 2 weeks without sleep, the human body starts to shut down. The skin turns pale, the eyes become unfocused, motor functions deteriorate. Most people can't even stand at that point, let alone walk for miles through the wilderness. But Marcus Hale was still moving. I kept searching, falling down rabbit holes of medical studies and case reports. Fatal familial insomnia, extreme stress responses, adrenaline overdoses. None of it fit. Nothing explained how someone could go 2 weeks without sleep and still function, unless he wasn't functioning, unless he was just moving. I closed my phone and stared at the dark ceiling. Somewhere out there, Marcus Hale was walking through the night, his body failing, his mind unraveling. And for reasons I couldn't explain, he wouldn't stop. The next day, we got 3 more sightings. All of them within a 10-mile radius, all of them in the middle of the night. And all of them described the same thing. A man who looked like he was dying, walking north, always north, like he was being pulled by an invisible thread. "We need to cut him off," Garrett said. "Figure out where he's going and get there first." I looked at the map. The sightings formed a pattern, a line pointing toward the deepest part of the national forest, a place called Devil's Creek. It was remote, almost inaccessible, the kind of place where hikers went missing and were never found. "That's where he's going," I said. "Then that's where we need to be." We left at dawn, driving as far as the roads would take us, then hiking the rest of the way. The terrain was brutal, steep climbs and thick underbrush, but we pushed through. By midday, we'd reached Devil's Creek. It was a narrow gorge, carved out by a fast-moving stream, surrounded by cliffs on both sides. The only way in or out was a single trail that wound through the rocks. If Hale was heading here, we'd see him coming. We set up a position on a ridge overlooking the gorge and waited. Hours passed. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the forest grew dark. Garrett and I took turns watching through the thermal scope, scanning for any sign of movement. But there was nothing. Just the creek, rushing over the rocks, and the wind moving through the trees. And then, at 11:47 p.m., I saw him. A heat signature moving along the trail at the bottom of the gorge. Slow, steady, heading straight toward us. "I've got him," I whispered into the radio. "Where?" Garrett asked. 600 yards moving north, he's alone. Let's move." We descended into the gorge using the rocks for cover, keeping our distance. The figure was closer now, maybe 200 yards away. I could see him through the scope. A man in a dark jacket, walking with a strange, uneven gait. His head was down, his arms hanging loose at his sides. "Marcus Hale!" I shouted. "U.S. Marshals, stop where you are!" He didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. He just kept walking, like he hadn't heard me. "Hale!" I shouted again. "This is your last warning. Stop now, or we will use force." Still nothing. Garrett and I moved closer, weapons drawn, closing the distance. 50 yards, 30, 20, and then he stopped. He stood there perfectly still, his back to us. For a moment, I thought he was going to turn around to face us, to finally end this, but he didn't. He just stood there, swaying slightly like he was standing on the deck of a ship. "Hale," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Turn around, slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them." He didn't move. "Hale, do it now." And then, slowly, he started to turn. But there was something wrong with the way he moved. It wasn't smooth. It was jerky, mechanical, like his joints weren't working right, like he was a puppet being pulled by strings. When he finally faced us, I saw his face. The trucker had been right. His skin was gray, almost translucent, stretched tight over his skull. His eyes were open, but they didn't focus on us. They stared past us, at something we couldn't see. His mouth hung open and his breath came in short, rasping gasps. "Jesus," Garrett whispered. "Hale," I said again, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's over. You need to come with us. We'll get you help." His mouth moved, like he was trying to speak, but no sound came out. And then, slowly, he raised one hand and pointed behind us. I turned instinctively and saw nothing, just the dark forest and the rushing creek. When I looked back, Hale was walking again. Not toward us. Not away. Just walking deeper into the gorge, toward the cliffs. "Stop!" I shouted, running after him. "Hale, stop!" But he didn't stop. He reached the edge of the cliff, where the creek dropped into a waterfall, and without hesitation he stepped off. I lunged forward, grabbing for him, but I was too late. He fell, disappearing into the darkness below, swallowed by the sound of the rushing water. Garrett and I scrambled down the rocks, using our flashlights to search the pool at the base of the waterfall. The water was dark, churning, impossible to see through. We called for backup, for divers, for anyone who could help, but deep down I knew it was over. Marcus Hale was gone. The dive team arrived at dawn. They brought lights, ropes, and equipment designed to search fast-moving water in treacherous conditions. Garrett and I watched from the bank as they suited up, their faces grim and focused. This wasn't the first body recovery they'd done in Devil's Creek, and it wouldn't be the last. The gorge had a reputation. People fell. People drowned. The creek didn't give them back easily. "You sure he went in here?" the lead diver asked me. His name was Rodriguez, a compact man in his 40s with the kind of weathered face that came from spending too much time in cold water. "Positive," I said. "I saw him step off the cliff. Right there." I pointed to the spot where Hale had disappeared, maybe 30 feet above the waterfall. Rodriguez looked up, calculating the angle, the depth, the current. If he went in there, the water would have taken him downstream. Maybe a quarter mile, maybe more. Depends on how deep he sank. How long will it take? Could be hours, he said. Could be days. The bottom's full of rocks and debris. If he got caught on something, we might not find him at all. Garrett and I exchanged a look. "We need to find him," she said. "We'll do our best," Rodriguez said, pulling on his mask. "But no promises." The search began. The divers worked in pairs, descending into the pool, their lights cutting through the murky water like knives. Garrett and I waited on the bank, watching the surface, waiting for them to surface. Minutes stretched into hours. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist, but the air stayed cold. I kept replaying the moment in my mind. The way Hale had looked at us, the way he'd pointed behind us, the way he'd walked off the cliff like it was the most natural thing in the world. "He didn't even try to catch himself," Garrett said quietly. She was sitting on a rock, her arms wrapped around her knees. "He just stepped off." "I know. Why would he do that? I don't know. But I had theories, none of them good." At 10:30 a.m., one of the divers surfaced, pulling off his mask and waving to Rodriguez. "We've got something," he called. Garrett and I moved closer to the edge as the divers hauled something out of the water. It was a body, gray, bloated, tangled in weeds. They laid it on the rocks, and Rodriguez knelt down, checking for signs of life even though we all knew there wouldn't be any. "Is it him?" I asked. Rodriguez turned the body over, and I got a look at the face. It was Hale, or what was left of him. His skin was pale, almost white, his eyes open and clouded. There were cuts on his face and hands, probably from the rocks, but otherwise he looked almost peaceful, like he'd finally stopped running. "Yeah," I said, "that's him." The coroner arrived an hour later, a thin woman in her 50s named her Paulson, who'd seen more dead bodies in this county than anyone else. She knelt down next to Hale, examining him with the kind of detached professionalism that came from years of practice. "Time of death?" I asked. "Hard to say," she said, not looking up. "The cold water slows decomposition, but based on the condition of the body, I'd guess within the last 12 hours. "That matches," Garrett said. "We saw him go in around midnight." Dr. Paulson frowned. "You saw him go in?" "Yeah," I said. "Why?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she continued her examination, checking his eyes, his mouth, his hands. Finally, she sat back and looked at us. "How long was he in the water?" 8 hours, give or take," I said. "And you're sure it was him? You saw him fall?" "Positive." Dr. Paulson's frown deepened. "Then I don't understand." "Understand what?" She pointed to Hale's hands. "Look at his fingers. The skin's wrinkled, but not excessively, and his eyes. There's no significant cloudiness, no sign of prolonged water exposure. If he'd been in the water for 8 hours, especially in cold, fast-moving water like this, I'd expect more damage. More swelling, but this," she trailed off, shaking her head. "What are you saying?" Garrett asked. "I'm saying it looks like he's only been in the water for an hour. Maybe less." "That's not possible," I said. "We were here the whole time. We watched the search. He didn't surface." "I'm not saying he did," Sir Paulson said. "I'm just telling you what the body is showing me. And it doesn't match your timeline." She called for the body to be transported to the morgue, and Garrett and I stood there watching as they loaded Hale onto a stretcher and carried him up the trail. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. We were both thinking the same thing. Something wasn't right. Back at the sheriff's office, we debriefed with Milliken. He listened to our account without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his face with both hands. "So, let me get this straight," he said. "You chased him for 2 weeks. He never slept, never stopped moving, and when you finally cornered him, he walked off a cliff." "That's the short version," I said. "And the coroner thinks he wasn't in the water as long as he should have been." "Yeah." Milliken was quiet for a long moment. "You think there's a mistake?" "Maybe the body got caught on something, kept it from drifting." "Maybe," Garrett said. "But that doesn't explain the rest of it." "What rest?" "The sightings," I said. "The distances he covered. The fact that he didn't sleep for 2 weeks. None of it makes sense, Sheriff." Milliken looked at me, his eyes hard. "What are you saying, Marshal? That this was something other than a fugitive running from the law?" "I'm saying I don't know what it was." He stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the mountains. "People do strange things when they're desperate," he said finally. "They push themselves past what they thought was possible. They survive things they shouldn't. Maybe Hale was just tougher than most. Maybe," I said, though I didn't believe it. Milliken turned back to us. "Look, I know this case has been hard on both of you. You've been out there for weeks, barely sleeping, barely eating. Maybe you're seeing things that aren't there. We're not making this up. Garrett said, her voice sharp. I'm not saying you are, Milliken said. But sometimes, when you're exhausted, your brain fills in the gaps, makes connections that aren't really there. I've seen it happen before. We know what we saw, I said. Milliken sighed. Then put it in your report, but do me a favor, keep it factual. Stick to what you can prove. The rest? He trailed off, shaking his head. The rest is just going to raise questions nobody wants to answer. The autopsy was scheduled for the next morning. Garrett and I went back to the motel, but neither of us could sleep. I kept thinking about Hale's face, the way his skin had looked, the way his eyes had stared past us. I kept thinking about the word carved into the tree, awake. At 2 a.m., my phone rang. It was Dr. Paulson. Marshall Corman, she said. Her voice sounded strained. Yeah, I said, sitting up in bed. What's wrong? I need you to come to the morgue, now. Why? What happened? Just come. Please. I woke Garrett, and we drove to the hospital in silence. The morgue was in the basement, a sterile white room that smelled like disinfectant and death. Dr. Paulson was waiting for us, still in her scrubs, her face pale. What's going on? I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she led us to the examination table where Hale's body was laid out, covered by a sheet. She pulled it back, and I saw his face again. But something was different. His eyes were closed. I don't understand, Garrett said. We saw him at the creek. His eyes were open. They were, Dr. Paulson said. When I examined the body this afternoon, his eyes were open. Clouded, like I told you. But when I came back tonight to start the autopsy, they were closed. Maybe someone closed them, I said. One of your assistants. No one else has been in here, Dr. Paulson said. I checked the logs. I was the last person to see the body, and I didn't close his eyes. Then how? There's more, she interrupted. She pulled the sheet down further, revealing Hale's chest. I started the external examination. Look at this. She pointed to a series of marks on his torso. They were faint, almost invisible, but under the light I could see them. Lines, dozens of them, crisscrossing his skin in a strange pattern. What are those? Garrett asked. I don't know, Dr. Paulson said. They weren't there this afternoon. I would have noticed. You're saying they appeared after he died? I'm saying they weren't there before, and now they are. And I don't have an explanation for it. I stared at the marks. They looked deliberate, almost like some kind of script or symbol, but I couldn't make sense of them. Have you taken photos? Yes, Dr. Paulson said. But there's something else. When I measured the body for the autopsy report, I noticed something odd, his height. What about it? According to his arrest records, Marcus Hale was 6'2", but the body on this table is 6'4". That's not possible, Garrett said. We saw him. It's the same man. I know, Dr. Paulson said, but the measurements don't lie. Either your records are wrong, or something happened to the body. Bodies don't grow after death, I said. No, Dr. Paulson agreed. They don't. We stood there in silence, staring at the body. Finally, Garrett spoke. What do you want us to do? I don't know, Dr. Paulson said. But I needed you to see this because whatever's going on, it's not normal, and I don't think it's over. She covered the body again, and we left. Outside, the air was cold and still. Garrett leaned against the car, her arms crossed, staring at the sky. What the hell is happening, David? I don't know, I said. We saw him fall. We watched them pull him out of the water. That's him in there. It has to be. I know. But the height, the marks, the eyes, none of it makes sense. I didn't have an answer. We stood there for a long time, neither of us speaking, both of us trying to make sense of something that had no sense to be made. Finally, Garrett said, "We need to see the trail cameras." "What?" "The cameras," she said. "The ones that caught him walking through the forest. We need to go back and check them, all of them." "Why?" "Because I need to know," she said. "I need to know if we were chasing the same man the whole time." We drove out to the forest at dawn. The trail cameras were still there, mounted on trees at various points along the routes Hale had taken. We pulled the SD cards from each one and loaded them onto a laptop in the car. There were hundreds of images, most of them showing nothing but empty forest, deer, the occasional hiker. But then we found them. The photos of Hale. We went through them one by one, comparing the timestamps, the locations, the angles. And slowly, a pattern emerged. In the first few photos taken in the days after Hale had fled, he looked normal. Tired, maybe, but human. His face was recognizable, his posture upright. But as the days went on, something changed. In the later photos, his face started to blur, like the camera couldn't quite focus on him. His movements became jerky, unnatural. And in the final photo, taken the night before we cornered him at Devil's Creek, he didn't look human at all. He looked like a shadow. Garrett zoomed in on the image. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," I said. But I felt that cold sensation again, settling into my chest. We spent the rest of the day going through the evidence, trying to find some rational explanation. But there wasn't one. Everything pointed to the same impossible conclusion. The man we'd been chasing wasn't Marcus Hale, or he was, but he'd become something else. That night, I called Dr. Paulson. "Have you finished the autopsy?" "No," she said. "I've been trying, but something keeps happening." "What do you mean?" "Every time I try to start, the equipment malfunctions. The lights flicker, the instruments stop working, and the body..." She paused. "The body keeps moving." "Moving?" "Small things, a finger twitching, his head turning slightly. I know it's just post-mortem spasms, but it doesn't feel right. Do you want us to come back?" "No," she said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. I'll finish the report tomorrow, but I'm not going to be alone with the body anymore." She hung up, and I sat there, staring at my phone. Garrett was watching me. What did she say? She said the body keeps moving. Jesus Christ. I looked out the window at the dark forest. Somewhere out there, Marcus Hale had been running from something or toward something for 2 weeks straight, and now he was dead. But the feeling I had, the cold, creeping sensation in my chest, told me that whatever had been out there wasn't gone. It was still here. I never finished writing the report. I tried, God knows I tried. I sat at my desk for hours, staring at the blank screen, trying to put it all into words. The chase, the sightings, the way Hale had looked at us before he stepped off the cliff. But every time I started typing, my hands would stop, because the moment I put it down in writing, it would become real. And some part of me didn't want it to be real. The official report went to Milliken instead. He filed it under fugitive apprehended, deceased, and closed the case. As far as the federal government was concerned, Marcus Hale was dead. The manhunt was over, and that was the end of it. But it wasn't. Dr. Paulson completed the autopsy 3 days after we found the body. Her report listed the cause of death as drowning, with contributing factors of exhaustion and exposure. She noted the unusual markings on the torso but attributed them to post-mortem changes caused by the water. She didn't mention the height discrepancy. She didn't mention the eyes. And when I called her to ask why, she said, "Because no one would believe it, and I need to keep my job." I understood. I didn't blame her. Garrett and I were reassigned to different cases almost immediately. The service wanted us back in rotation, back to normal work, tracking bail jumpers and serving warrants like we'd always done. But normal felt like a lie now. Every case felt small, trivial, because none of them were like Hale. We stayed in touch, Garrett and I. We'd call each other late at night when the cases were quiet and the offices were empty, and we'd talk about what we'd seen. We never said it out loud, but we both knew. We'd chased something we didn't understand. And it had gotten away. 2 months after Hale's death, I got a call from a ranger in the Pisgah National Forest. He said hikers had been reporting strange sightings in the Devil's Creek area. A man in a dark jacket, walking alone at night, always heading north. The descriptions matched Hale's. "You want me to check it out?" the ranger asked. "No," I said. "Leave it alone." "You sure?" "Positive." He hung up, and I never heard about it again. But I started seeing the reports. They came in sporadically every few weeks from different parts of the forest. A man walking at night. Gray skin, empty eyes, always moving north. Some reports were from hikers, some were from locals. One was from a state trooper who'd tried to pull the man over for walking on the highway. The trooper said the man had looked at him, turned, and walked into the trees. When the trooper followed, the man was gone. I didn't follow up on any of them. I didn't want to know. Garrett called me 6 months after the case closed. It was late, past midnight, and I was half asleep when I answered. "David," she said. Her voice was tight, strained. "What's wrong?" "I saw him." I sat up. "What?" "I saw him, Marcus Hale. I was driving through North Carolina, passing through the mountains, and I saw him. He was standing on the side of the road, just standing there, staring at the cars. Garrett, Hale's dead. We pulled his body out of the creek. I know what we did," she said. "But I saw him. It was him, David. Same jacket, same build, same face. He looked right at me when I drove past. And I swear to God, he smiled. Maybe it was someone who looked like him. No." Her voice was firm. "It was him." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her she was wrong, that she was seeing things, that the case had gotten into her head and wouldn't let go. But another part of me, the part that had been there in the gorge, that had seen Hale step off the cliff, believed her. "What do you want to do?" I asked finally. "I don't know," she said. "But I needed to tell someone. I needed to know I wasn't crazy." "You're not crazy. Then what's happening?" "I don't know." She hung up, and I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Marcus Hale. About the way he'd walked through the forest for 2 weeks without stopping. About the way he'd pointed behind us before he fell. About the word carved into the tree, awake. I fell asleep eventually, but I dreamed about him. In the dream, I was back in the gorge, standing at the edge of the cliff, watching Hale fall. But when he hit the water, he didn't sink. He floated. And then he stood up, water streaming off his body, and he started walking again. North. Always north. I woke up in a cold sweat. The next morning, I called Milliken. "Sheriff," I said, "I need to ask you something." "Go ahead, Marshal." "The sightings in the forest, the man in the dark jacket, have they stopped?" There was a long pause. "No," he said finally. "They haven't. How many reports have you gotten?" 12 in the last month, maybe more. I stopped counting." "And you're not investigating?" "What's there to investigate?" Milliken asked. "A man walking in the woods? That's not a crime, Marshal. And even if it was, we'd never find him. You know that. But the descriptions, I know what the descriptions say. Milliken interrupted. "But Marcus Hale is dead. We have a body. We have a death certificate. As far as the law is concerned, the case is closed. But let it go, Marshal," he said, his voice firm. "Whatever you think you saw out there, whatever you think is happening, it's not your problem anymore. You did your job. You brought him in. That's all that matters." He hung up before I could respond. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the wall. He was right, of course. The case was closed. Hale was dead. I'd moved on to other cases, other fugitives, other problems. But the feeling wouldn't go away. The cold, creeping sensation that something was still out there. Still moving, still awake. I pulled up the map of the National Forest on my computer and marked every sighting that had been reported since Hale's death. They formed a pattern. A rough circle centered on Devil's Creek, spreading outward slowly, like ripples in water. He wasn't just walking. He was expanding, covering more ground, like he was searching for something, or someone. I closed the map and leaned back in my chair. There was no way to explain it. No rational explanation for how a dead man could still be walking through the forest. No logical reason for why his body had changed in the morgue. No answer for the marks on his skin, or the discrepancy in his height, or the way his eyes had closed on their own. But I knew what I'd seen. And I knew what Garrett had seen. And I knew that somewhere out there, in the dark corners of the Pisgah National Forest, Marcus Hale was still moving. The last time I went back to North Carolina was a year after the case closed. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I just got in my car and drove, following the roads into the mountains, past the small towns and gas stations and rest stops where Hale had been sighted. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to see it again. To stand in the place where it had ended and try to make sense of what had happened. I parked at the trailhead and hiked into Devil's Creek. It was late afternoon, the sun low in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees. The forest was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no insects, just the sound of my boots on the trail and the distant rush of the creek. When I reached the gorge, I stood at the edge of the cliff and looked down at the water. It was the same as I remembered. Dark, fast-moving, unforgiving. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes, maybe. Hours. But at some point, I felt it. That cold sensation settling into my chest. The feeling of being watched. I turned slowly, scanning the trees, the rocks, the shadows. And then I saw him. He was standing at the far end of the gorge, maybe 200 yards away, partially obscured by the trees. Dark jacket, torn jeans, gray skin. He wasn't moving. Just standing there watching me. I should have called out. I should have drawn my weapon. I should have done something. But I didn't. I just stood there staring back at him, feeling that cold sensation spread through my body. And then he started walking. Not toward me, not away, just walking. Deeper into the forest, his movements slow and deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. I didn't follow him. I didn't need to, because I knew where he was going. North. Always north. Moving through the darkness, never stopping, never sleeping, never resting, always awake. I turned and walked back to my car. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if he was still there. I just wanted to leave, to put as much distance between myself and that place as possible. When I got home, I pulled out the file on Marcus Hale and locked it in a drawer. I told myself I'd never open it again, that I'd let it go, move on, forget about the man who'd run for 2 weeks without stopping. But I couldn't forget. Because every time I close my eyes, I see him, standing at the edge of the gorge, staring at me with those empty, gray eyes, pointing behind me at something I couldn't see, And I know, somewhere deep in the back of my mind, that he's still out there. Still walking. Still searching. And someday, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday, he's going to find what he's looking for. I just hope I'm not there when he does. The reports still come in. Every few months, someone sees him. A hiker, a ranger, a trucker passing through. They all describe the same thing. A man in a dark jacket, walking alone at night, heading north. Gray skin, empty eyes, never stopping. And every time I hear about it, I feel that cold sensation again. Because I know it's him. I know it's Marcus Hale. Or whatever Marcus Hale became. I've tried to explain it to people, to Garrett, to Milliken, to anyone who'll listen. But nobody wants to hear it. They say I'm reading too much into it. That I'm seeing patterns where there aren't any. That the case got into my head and won't let go. Maybe they're right. But I don't think so. Because last week I got a call from a ranger in Tennessee. He said a man matching Hale's description had been spotted walking along the Appalachian Trail. Gray skin, empty eyes, moving north. The ranger asked if I wanted him to investigate. I told him no, because I know now that you can't catch Marcus Hale. You can't stop him. You can't even slow him down. He's not running from something anymore. He's not running towards something. He's just running. Forever. Through the darkness. Through the cold. Through the forests and the mountains and the places where people don't go. And he's never going to stop. I still have nightmares about that night at Devil's Creek. About the way he looked at us. About the way he stepped off the cliff without hesitation. About the way his body disappeared into the water and then came back wrong. Sometimes in those nightmares, I'm the one standing at the edge of the cliff. And when I look down, I see him at the bottom of the gorge, standing in the water, staring up at me. His eyes are open, but they're empty, and he's smiling. And then he starts to climb. I wake up before he reaches me. But the feeling stays. The cold, creeping sensation that he's out there. Getting closer. One step at a time. I don't sleep much anymore, and when I do, I make sure all the doors are locked, all the windows closed, all the lights off, because I don't want to see him standing outside, staring in, waiting. I don't know what Marcus Hale was running from. I don't know what he became. And I don't know why he's still out there, walking through the darkness, never stopping, never resting. But I know this. Whatever it was that kept him awake for 2 weeks, whatever it was that changed him, whatever it was that pulled him into those woods and wouldn't let him go, it's still there, and it's still waiting. And someday, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday, it's going to find someone else. Someone like Marcus Hale. Someone who can't stop running. Someone who can't sleep. And when it does, we'll get another file on our desk. Another manhunt. Another chase through the darkness. And we'll follow them. Because that's what we do. We follow the fugitives into the places they run. Into the forests and the mountains and the darkness. But this time, I won't be the one going. Because I've seen what's out there. And I know now that some things aren't meant to be caught. Some things are meant to run forever. The file is still in my drawer, locked, untouched. I haven't opened it since the day I got back from Devil's Creek. But I know what's inside. The photos, the reports, the timeline that doesn't make sense, the evidence that points to something we don't have words for. And I know that one day, someone else is going to open that file. They're going to see the same things I saw. They're going to ask the same questions. And they're going to go looking for answers. I hope they don't find them, because some questions aren't meant to be answered. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. And some things, once you've seen them, you can't unsee. Marcus Hale is still out there. I know it, Garrett knows it, Dr. Paulson knows it, and somewhere deep down, Sheriff Milliken knows it too. But we don't talk about it, we don't acknowledge it, we just move on, we file the reports, we close the cases, we tell ourselves it's over, but it's not over. It's never going to be over. Because Marcus Hale is awake, and he's never going to sleep again. The house at 1847 Hickory Lane shouldn't have been difficult to find. It was right there on the county property maps, on Google Street View, on every GPS system we checked. A single-story ranch house with beige vinyl siding and a detached garage, sitting on 3/4 of an acre in rural Kentucky, about 40 minutes outside of Louisville. The kind of house you'd drive past 1,000 times without noticing. But there was one thing missing from every database, every real estate listing, every property record we could find. Interior photographs. Not a single one. And that should have been the first warning sign. My name is Deputy U.S. Marshal Jennifer Reeves, and I've been with the service for 9 years. I've served warrants on crack houses where the floorboards were rotting through, on mansions with panic rooms and hidden vaults, on everything in between. I've walked into places where I knew, absolutely knew, that someone was hiding and waiting for us to make a mistake. I've learned to read a space, to feel when something's wrong, to trust my instincts even when they don't make logical sense. But the house on Hickory Lane broke all my instincts. It broke something deeper than that, and by the time we figured out what was happening, it was already too late to walk away. The fugitive's name was Raymond Caulfield, 47 years old, stocky build, thinning hair, the kind of face that belonged to a middle manager or a high school coach. Someone unremarkable, someone you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting him. But Raymond Caulfield had managed to embezzle over $2 million from the construction company where he'd worked as an accountant, and when the FBI started closing in, he'd vanished. That was 6 months ago. The warrant for his arrest came through on a Wednesday morning in early October. Fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice. The FBI had traced his movements through a series of prepaid credit cards and burner phones following him from Louisville to Nashville to Memphis and back again. But 3 weeks ago, the trail had gone cold. The last ping from his phone had come from a cell tower near the town of Harrodsburg, Kentucky, population 8,000, the kind of place where strangers stick out and everyone knows everyone else's business. The FBI had passed the case to us because they had bigger fish to fry, and because tracking fugitives is what we do. My partner, Deputy Marshal Thomas Vega, and I drove down to Harrodsburg on a Thursday afternoon, the air crisp and cold, the leaves on the trees burning in shades of orange and red. It should have been beautiful, it should have been routine. Vega had been with the service for 15 years, longer than me, with the kind of steady temperament that made him good at this job. He didn't get rattled easily, he didn't jump to conclusions. He worked methodically, checking every lead, following every thread, until the case was closed and the fugitive was in custody. We'd worked together for 3 years and I trusted him completely. "What do we know about the house?" Vega asked as we drove through the countryside, past farms and churches, and gas stations that looked like they hadn't changed since the 1970s. I flipped through the file. Property records show it's been owned by the same family since 1968. The Bishops. Last known resident was Eleanor Bishop, died in 2019. No heirs. The house went into probate, but it's been sitting empty ever since. Empty for 4 years? According to the county, yeah, but here's the interesting part. I pulled out a surveillance photo taken by a local deputy 2 weeks ago. It showed the house from the street, the grass overgrown, the windows dark, but there was a car in the driveway, a silver Honda Accord. That car is registered to a shell company that the FBI traced back to Caulfield. He's been using it to move around. So he's squatting in an abandoned house, Vega said. Smart. No one's checking on it. No neighbors close enough to notice. Exactly. And the closest neighbor is almost a quarter-mile away. It's perfect for someone who wants to disappear. We met with the local sheriff, a man named Dale Hutchins, at his office in downtown Harrodsburg. He was in his early 60s with white hair and a gut that spoke of too many years behind a desk. But his eyes were sharp, and when we showed him the surveillance photo, he nodded immediately. "Yeah, I know the place," Hutchins said. "The Bishop House. We've had the occasional call out there over the years. Teenagers breaking in, that kind of thing. But it's been quiet lately." "What can you tell us about the family?" I asked. Hutchins leaned back in his chair, thinking. Eleanor Bishop lived there her whole life. Never married, no kids. Kept to herself mostly. The house was her parents' before that. They bought it in the 60s, raised Eleanor there. When they died, she stayed. Lived there alone for, God, must have been 40 years. "Anyone visit her?" Vega asked. "Not that I recall. Like I said, she kept to herself. When she died, it took 3 days before anyone noticed. The mailman finally called it in when the mail started piling up." "What about the inside of the house?" I asked. "Have you been in there?" Hutchins frowned. "Once, maybe twice. The first time was back in the 90s when Eleanor called about a prowler. Turned out to be nothing, just a raccoon in the crawl space. The second time was after she died, when we did the welfare check." "What was it like inside?" He hesitated, and I saw something flicker across his face. Confusion, maybe, or uncertainty. "Honestly, I don't remember much. It was plain. Old furniture, smelled like dust. Nothing stood out." "Do you have any photos from the welfare check?" Vega asked. "We should," Hutchins said. "Let me pull the file." He left the office and came back 10 minutes later with a thin manila folder. He spread it out on the desk, and I saw the incident report, handwritten notes, a basic property sketch, but no photos. "That's strange," Hutchins muttered, flipping through the pages. "I could have sworn we took photos. We always do on welfare checks." "Maybe they're in a different file," I suggested. "Maybe," but he didn't sound convinced. "I'll have someone look into it. In the meantime, what's your plan?" "We're going to set up surveillance," Vega said. "Watch the house. See if Caulfield's still there. If he is, we'll move in and take him into custody." "You want backup?" "Not yet," I said. "We don't want to spook him. If he sees a bunch of cop cars rolling up, he'll run. We'll handle it ourselves for now." Hutchins gave us directions to the house and offered us the use of an unmarked car, which we accepted. By late afternoon, we were parked on a dirt road about 300 yards from 1847 Hickory Lane, hidden behind a stand of trees, watching the house through binoculars. The house looked exactly like it did in the photos. Beige siding, dark windows, overgrown grass. The silver Honda was still in the driveway, parked at an angle like someone had pulled in quickly and never bothered to straighten out. There were no lights on inside, no movement, no sign that anyone was home. We watched for 3 hours. The sun set and the temperature dropped, and still there was nothing. No lights, no movement. Just the house, sitting there in the growing darkness, looking more abandoned by the minute. "Maybe he's not here," Vega said finally. "The car's here. He could have switched vehicles, or someone could have picked him up. Maybe. But I didn't think so. There was something about the house that made me uneasy, though I couldn't put my finger on what it was. It was too still, too quiet, like it was holding its breath." At 9:47 p.m., a light came on in one of the back rooms. I grabbed the binoculars and focused on the window. The light was faint, flickering, like candlelight. I could see movement inside, a shadow passing across the wall. Someone was definitely in there. "That's him," Vega said. "Has to be." "We need to move now," I said, "before he realizes we're here." We called Hutchins and told him we were going in. He offered to send backup, but we declined. 2 marshals against 1 unarmed fugitive. The odds were in our favor. We approached the house on foot, moving slowly, staying in the shadows. The front door was unlocked, which should have been another warning sign. But we were focused on the job, on taking Caulfield into custody, and we didn't stop to think about why the door would be unlocked in an abandoned house. I pushed it open slowly, my hand on my weapon, and stepped inside. The interior was dark. Too dark. Even with my flashlight, I could barely see 5 feet in front of me. The air smelled wrong. Not like dust or decay, but like something chemical. Antiseptic, like a hospital. "U.S. Marshals," I called out. "Raymond Caulfield, we have a warrant for your arrest. Come out with your hands up." No response. Vega and I moved through the house room by room, clearing each space systematically. The layout was simple. A living room, a kitchen, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom. But something was off. The rooms felt wrong. Too small or too large. The distances didn't match what I'd expected based on the floor plan. In the back bedroom, we found the source of the light. A single candle burning on a windowsill, but the room was empty. No furniture, no belongings, nothing. Just the candle. "Where is he?" Vega muttered. I scanned the room with my flashlight. The walls were bare, the floor covered in a thin layer of dust, but there were footprints in the dust. Fresh ones. Leading from the door to the window and then stopping. Just stopping in the middle of the room, like whoever had been walking had simply vanished. "Vega," I said quietly. "Look at this." He came over and shone his light on the footprints. I watched his face change as he processed what he was seeing. "That's not possible." "I know." We searched the rest of the house, but there was no sign of Caulfield. No hidden doors, no crawl space, no attic. Just empty rooms and that lingering smell of antiseptic. We checked the garage, the yard, even the car in the driveway. Nothing. By the time we left, it was past midnight. We sat in the unmarked car, staring at the house, trying to make sense of what we'd just seen. "He was in there," Vega said. "We saw the light. We saw the footprints." "I know. So where did he go?" I didn't have an answer, and that's what scared me. We went back to the motel in Harrodsburg and tried to sleep, but I couldn't. I kept thinking about the house, about the way the rooms had felt, about the footprints that ended in the middle of an empty floor, about the door that had been unlocked like we'd been expected. At some point, I must have dozed off because I woke to my phone buzzing. It was 6:23 a.m. Hutchins was calling. "Marshal Reeves," he said when I answered. "You need to get out to the house now." "Why? What happened?" "Someone called it in, said they saw lights on inside again, and," he paused, "and the caller said they saw someone standing in the window, watching the street." We were at the house within 20 minutes. The silver Honda was still in the driveway. The front door was still unlocked. But this time, when we went inside, everything was different. The layout had changed. I'm not talking about furniture being moved. I'm talking about the rooms themselves being in different places. The kitchen, which had been on the left side of the house the night before, was now on the right. The back bedroom, where we'd found the candle, was now at the front. The bathroom, which had been down a short hallway, was now off the living room. Vega and I stood in the middle of the living room, turning slowly, trying to understand what we were seeing. "This isn't the same house," Vega said. "It has to be," I said. "We're at the same address. same car outside. Then how? I don't know. We searched the house again, more carefully this time, taking measurements, taking photos, documenting everything. But the more we looked, the less sense it made. The dimensions were wrong. The windows were in different places. Even the walls felt different. Thicker in some places, thinner in others. And we still couldn't find Raymond Caulfield. By mid-morning, we'd called in reinforcements, 2 more deputy marshals, a K-9 unit, and a team from the FBI. We set up a perimeter around the house and searched every inch of the property. The dog hit on something in the garage, Caulfield's scent probably, but there was no sign of where he'd gone. "He's playing with us," one of the FBI agents said. "He knows we're here, and he's messing with our heads." "How?" I asked. "How do you change the layout of a house overnight?" The agent didn't have an answer. We searched the house 3 more times that day. Each time the layout was different. Not drastically, just enough to make us doubt ourselves. A door that had been on the left was now on the right. A window that had faced the backyard now faced the side. Small changes, impossible changes. By evening, I was starting to question my own memory. Had the kitchen always been on the right? Had the bedroom always been at the front? I couldn't be sure anymore. And that terrified me more than anything else. That night, we set up cameras inside the house. Motion activated, infrared, covering every room. If Caulfield came back, we'd catch him. If the house changed again, we'd have proof. We watched the feeds from the unmarked car, Vega and I taking turns, each of us staring at the screens until our eyes burned. For hours, nothing happened. The house sat there, dark and still, the rooms empty. And then, at 2:34 a.m., every camera went dark at the same time. We were inside within 90 seconds. The cameras were still there, still recording, but the footage showed nothing but static. And the house had changed again. This time, there were more rooms that hadn't been there before. A narrow hallway leading to a door we'd never seen. A closet that opened into what looked like another bedroom. The house was growing. "We need to leave," Vega said. His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the fear underneath. "Right now." "We can't leave without Caulfield." "He's not here, Jen. He was never here. This is something else." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this house isn't right, and we need to get out before—" He stopped. We both heard it at the same time. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from somewhere deeper in the house, from one of the new rooms. I drew my weapon. "Raymond Caulfield, U.S. Marshals, show yourself." The footsteps stopped. And then, from somewhere in the darkness, I heard a voice. It was faint, barely audible, but it was there. "You're in the wrong house." We stood, frozen, in the dark living room, our flashlights cutting narrow beams through the blackness, both of us listening to the silence that had swallowed the voice. The words echoed in my head. "You're in the wrong house." But that didn't make sense. We were at 1847 Hickory Lane. The address matched. The car outside matched. Everything matched except the house itself. "Did you hear that?" I whispered to Vega. "Yeah." His voice was steady, but his hand was tight on his weapon. "Where did it come from?" I swept my flashlight across the room, but the beam seemed weaker than it should have been, like the darkness was absorbing the light. Sounded like it came from the back, one of those new rooms that shouldn't exist. I know. We moved forward slowly, clearing corners, checking doorways, following proper procedure even though every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave. The hallway stretched ahead of us, longer than it should have been. I counted my steps, 15, 20, 25. The hallway in this house shouldn't have been more than 10 feet long, but we were still walking,